I may have just made a massive mistake, but I did decide to buy that IBM Selectric for 10. It powered on. Now it didn't move anything. I'm hoping I can clean it and that'll fix it, but I could hear the hum of the motor, which makes me feel a lot better about it because at least it takes electricity. The other thing that I love is that my total was 1066 with tax, which is the year of Battle of Hastings. So it's like a nice little sign that I may be for trouble with this IBM.
Hey guys, it's Sarah from Just My Typewriter, and I'm back with another installment of buying a bad typewriter. I've been doing typewriter repair for about 7 years, and I've learned a lot between learning how to light clean something, do some minor repairs, and then deciding if I want to keep a typewriter in my collection or resell it. And over the years, maybe I've gotten a little too confident in my abilities to do typewriter repair. And then you run into a typewriter that will just instantly humble you. For me, it was a 1960s Selectric. So this is a 1960s Selectric with a fabric ribbon cartridge. So it is a little different than the Selectric 2 I've had previously. I did buy this at a restore for $10.66. Pause for dramatic effect. And I did test it in the store. Now I tested it and I turned it on and at least I heard a motor humming. That gave me a little bit of confidence, but as I was clicking around on the keys, it started to thump. Now I didn't know yet that that was a bad sign. I thought it was workable enough that I could maybe try to learn how to fix it. So I brought it home and started this very long process of learning Selectric repair. Now before I get any further into this video or series, I do want to point out that none of this should be followed as repair advice. I am not a professional. I don't even know the proper terminology. I've been poking around on this machine for months, but that doesn't mean that I know how something works. I can't help you fix your Selectric, and I wouldn't recommend using anything that I did as a way to fix your machine. There are professionals who are IBM certified and trained who know their stuff, and there are some really helpful resources out there. So I will include in the description below all of the video tutorials that I followed from the very helpful Phoenix typewriter, as well as a link to the IBM specific Facebook repair group. Ask them for help. They know what they're talking about, and you will need a dictionary to understand what they are saying to you. With that said, I brought home my Selectric full of hope and put it on the repair table. Now, I did turn it on again once I got home, and that thumping kind of persisted. Now, if I'm working on a manual typewriter, a lot of things can be fixed with a really light, easy cleaning. Stuff like gunked up keys can keep a machine from operating properly. Putting the margins out to the edges can help fix problems. So I thought I would start with some of the basic stuff that works on manual typewriters. I started with a light air compressing clean and very quickly ran into kind of my first major obstacle. That being this foam. So inside your Selectric, there are going to be foam pieces underneath the keyboard, on the bottom of the inner panel, on the bottom tray, on the side panels. This is where a lot of the smell was coming from when I brought this home. It smelled like grease and a car, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I've had it sitting under a box on the side of my living room just to keep the smell out. And a lot of that was coming from this foam stuff inside. Now when I started air compressing it, particles of foam were flying all over my bathroom and I started to get really nervous. A, because I didn't know what the composition of that foam was. I started having like a hypochondriac reaction where I thought it was asbestos. It's not asbestos. And I knew I needed to get all of it out of the machine. And that took several days.
Okay, so I'm wearing a mask because there's some filament or foam inside the IBM that disintegrates into dust the second you touch it. I don't think it's asbestos. I did look into it because I was concerned about that, but I've got an air purifier going. I have the window open. I'm covering my eyes and I'm covering my mouth and nose. Doors closed, no cats. I'm going to remove it because that's where a lot of the smell is, and it's just disintegrating anyways, but safety first. That's why we're in a cleanable bathtub that we have dexterized. So let's air compress the main body of the machine. One thing I've noticed about this is it seems like really sticky. Things aren't popping back up. My guess is based on all this residue that's around the keyboard is that maybe someone spilled their coffee, but that is just a guess. So I'm gonna I guess, have to clean this or take it apart to see what it looks like on the inside. The space bar is permanently depressed. Doesn't seem to pop back up. And obviously it's not on, but something is locking everything in place.
Now, I was trying to get this foam out without taking off the casing because I was intimidated by the casing of the Selectric. Good news, you can take off the casing of your Selectric. There are 2 latches on the inside of your top cover on the right and left sides. You can push those back and forth to lock it into place. And then your typewriter or the IBM mechanics are latched into the base metal bottom with another latch on the left side of the keyboard. You can just push that back. Mine were a little greased in place because this thing was drenched in seized up grease, and we'll get to that in a bit. So I did have to hit that with WD-40 before I could loosen that and remove it from the metal base. And then I set to removing the rest of that foam. Once I had the foam out of this thing, I was able to take a much better video of my problem and post it on the typewriter maintenance group. And this is where I learned about the IBM Golf Shop Facebook page. When I need help, usually go to the resources I have available to me, which are repair groups. And there is an IBM specific group where you can get all of your questions answered. The interesting thing about IBMs, unlike a lot of other typewriters or manual typewriters, we do still have people alive who were trained by the company to do service on IBM machines, IBM execs. So they still exist out there and they have access to Facebook. So when you run into a question, there's usually someone there to be able to help you. So I posted this video on the Facebook group and then eventually posted on the IBM Facebook group. And the first comment that everybody told me immediately was, please don't ever turn this machine on again. Apparently it had seized up, nothing was moving, and so the motor inside this was trying to turn the belt to turn the clutches, but it wasn't able to turn anything because the entire machine was frozen. If you continue to do that, eventually you will crack the inner plastic hubcap or center hub clutch. There's a lot of car terminology in this process. You'll break that and crack that, and that becomes even more difficult to replace. So I stopped turning it on at the request of the Facebook group. They had suggested that a lot of the problems you're going to run into with an IBM come from the fact that it has seized up due to all the grease inside the machine. Now, it does need grease to operate. Unlike a manual typewriter, which I don't recommend lubricating in a lot of cases in a lot of areas, this does need proper lubrication in quite a few pivot points. It is designed to operate with that in there. But the old grease or oil they used on these when they were manufactured has seized up since the 70s. And what it does is it acts kind of like glue or honey. A lot of viscosity, really sticky. It acts like a really sticky substance that gets into everything and locks everything in place. And it can even harden over time as well. So often when you run into a machine like this that is frozen, the first thing you need to do is remove all of the old grease. And then eventually you're going to have to put it back. So I knew I had to kind of get all that grease off this machine, and the only way to do that it was with some sort of cleaner or solvent. So I removed the motor, or watched a tutorial to remove the motor from this machine so that I could soak the rest of the machine. Now when it comes to removing any of these dried up pieces of grease in an IBM, you have a couple options. The recommended is the full soak. This is where you take a tub of mineral spirits and you just drop your IBM in it and let it sit for a really long time until it dissolves everything. In hindsight, I kind of wish I'd gone with this method, but I didn't have a safe location to do that anywhere in my current living space, so I opted for the spot cleaning process, which took a lot longer.
So we successfully removed the motor and the dust covers. The next thing I have to do is soak off all of the old oil or the old grease. So we're in the bathroom, the IBM is in the bathtub, and the goal is to remove any of that old stuff that really has seized the clutch of the motor, because if it gets stuck in place, it's not able to rotate. So I think that's probably what's happening, or at least it's a place to start. So we're now going to soak some of these oil places or oil gunked up places with mineral spirits and then air compress it. Now, as always, anytime you're working with chemicals, you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. I would do this outside if I had an outside area. Instead, I'm in the bathroom with the window open. I've got an air purifier going. I'm going to be wearing protective eyewear. Cats are far away, so always make sure to take proper precautions, but this is where we're at. I think this is a really good example of how you can't always see everything. Under this element here, there is a ton of oil still, or grease still in there that's gunking up everything. And without a mainspring, and I'll remove this nylon cable, I should be able to eventually move this out of place. It's stuck in the escapement. A lot of people said it's midway through a print cycle, and you can tell that, I guess, based on this print shaft. So we're gonna soak this section. I have a section over here that I noticed more oil on yesterday, so I'm gonna hit that too. And we're just gonna keep degreasing and see what happens.
Still nothing was moving, and I was still trying to follow the advice of the golf ball IBM group. And one of the things that they recommended, besides don't ever turn this machine on again, was that I needed to get a Handcycle tool. Now, a Handcycle tool fits into the side of your clutch. It is reverse threaded, it threads in there, and it allows for you to operate the machine without it being powered on. This way you can do any repairs you might need to do without having to worry about electricity or the motor starting up randomly. So it allows for you to act as the engine to the car without ever having to start it. I did order one of these off of eBay. It was about $22 shipped, and I got it in the mail, and well.
And that tool lasted all of about 20 seconds. Already broke it, and now it's stuck somewhere in the IBM. So that's not good.
Now, I knew that I wasn't supposed to use this on a machine that wasn't completely free. The instructions said that. I was a little too confident and thought that I had cleaned off enough grease to utilize this tool to operate the cams and the clutch inside there. I did not, and immediately broke it off inside of the mechanism and wasn't able to find a way to get it out. That was a problem for future Sarah. I did get a comment from someone that it looked like it was stuck in a print cycle, so I knew that eventually I would have to rotate the machine using that Handcycle tool to get it through the print cycle so it could start over fresh. But because it was still locked up, I wasn't able to get it to move anywhere, and so I opted for something a little stronger than mineral spirits. I moved on to PB Blaster, which worked a lot faster.
So it's now later in March. The type element is still stuck pretty far to the, what side are you? The left side of the carriage. And I still can't get it unstuck even after trying and trying. So I had the recommendation to soak it in penetrating oil. So I used PB Blaster, and I just kind of blasted some of the stress points. I let it sit out in an aerated area where I could just kind of soak in that, and I cleaned off with mineral spirits. I got some movement, but it wasn't completely loosened up all the way, so I tried it again, and I'm gonna go in and wipe off and clean off all of the PB Blaster with mineral spirits again to see if that helps loosen it up. Everything I've seen in the comments says that you have to spend more time removing and degreasing than you think you do. So we're gonna try this again and see if that helps, and I have my second tool coming in the mail to fix the fact that I broke the first one, but I don't even want to use it until I can feel some more movement in the carriage.
I did order a second hand tool. I wasn't going to, but it seemed pretty impossible to work on this typewriter without having some sort of way to cycle the cam. In hindsight, good decision to order a second one, and I wasn't able to get it in place, but at least I had the right tools. Eventually, I had to hammer a screwdriver into this piece to get it out. I did get it out. I didn't film it because I don't recommend doing that on at least this machine. If you do mess up the threads of a screw, you can always do that. You can hammer in gently a flathead screw and cut a new groove kind of into the screw to allow you to get some space in there. You can also soak a rusted screw with WD-40 to loosen it up before doing that. Because this was stuck in place and was in a plastic holder cup, I probably shouldn't have done this, but it worked. That's why we're not following this as advice. As I was doing all of this process, I did start to run into some other issues besides it just being frozen. I lost the tension on my two pulleys, my tab and return pulleys. The way that this operates is it kind of has almost two drawbands to it. There is a mainspring, which you will have on a normal typewriter, that provides tension. That tension is attached to two ropes, at least in mine. On other ones, it's attached to a rope and a metal cord. The one rope feeds around the back of the machine onto the one side of your type unit, and it provides that return, that moving back to the left side of the carriage. On the other side, you have your tab cord, and your tab cord allows for you to move the other direction. Now, both of these are made of rope or like really thin twine, and they are attached with two little ends to them that attach to that type element. These had fallen off, and I knew I had to get them back on to operate it properly, so I had to refeed them through the pulleys, attach them to the bottom end of this type element, and then make sure it had enough tension. I only now have it on correctly, and it's been, let's see, March, April, May, June, 4 months. I had to do it 5 or 6 times over those 4 months, and only now does it seem to operate correctly. But at the time, I thought that this was in the right way. So don't get mad yet. They were at least on. There wasn't much tension on there, but I could at least hand cycle it to move the type element. And that was my big concern, is the type element seems stuck in the margins on the one side. It turns out it was locked up with a lot of grease. So by removing all of that grease and continuing to pick at it, I was eventually able to get that element to move. And the cables were attached for now, and it was looking up. But the cables illuminated another problem, which was that my rotate tape had been knocked off or fallen out of place. Now, there are 2 metallic bands that also operate within this machine outside of your cable pulleys, and these help take that golf ball at the top, because it's different than a mechanical typewriter, and rotate it and tilt it to hit the page. So you've got your rotate tape, which turns it, and your tilt, which moves it back and forth. Because you have to hit these letters in columns, I think they're 3 or 4 deep, so it does need to be able to spin and tilt to get all of those letters on the page. These 2 metallic bands, you don't want any kinks in them, and they can fall off the machine as you are working on it. And in my case, the rotate tape had just seemed to expand, and I couldn't really tell what was going on, but it didn't seem to have the right amount of tension on it. I decided to persist anyways, because maybe when I turned it back on, it would just magically work. Not the case. Anytime I'm working on a typewriter, I do want to be able to test it as I'm working to identify more problems. So I did decide to put this back together, knowing that it kind of wasn't perfect, and just see what I could get out of it. That metallic rotate tape wasn't in the right tension, so I wasn't getting the golf ball to move properly. I was getting sticky keys. Keys would be depressed and they wouldn't seem to operate. I had cleaned them while I was trying to loosen everything else up, but didn't seem to be enough. And I also was getting some double space bars, the enter wasn't working, just a lot of mechanical issues that were happening, even though I had got it to turn on at least and not thump anymore. So I had kind of overcome one hurdle, which was at least being able to turn the machine on. The next part of this process is doing the fiddly stuff, the adjustments. When it comes to typewriter repair, often when I run into a problem that I find kind of frustrating or I don't know how to tackle it, it does usually take me longer. This machine has tested my patience in a lot of ways. The first is because I'm not really interested in IBMs. I bought this because I was overconfident and it was cheap and I thought I could learn something new, but I very quickly realized that a lot of the stuff that goes into an IBM is beyond my level of knowledge, and because I'm not interested in using it as a typewriter, I don't use my IBM or hadn't used my IBM much before when I had one, I wasn't going to be able to get results out of it that I was happy with either. So I wasn't as motivated to continue working on it. It was more like a problem to solve, and man, every time I went in to fix one thing, I seemed to break 6 other things. I did have some issues getting advice when it came to working with the Facebook repair group. They are super knowledgeable and they know what they're talking about and they're fantastic resources, but they are not beginner friendly. So if you don't know the verbiage or the words, they are not necessarily there to teach you your ABCs of IBM repair, which is completely fair. A lot of them recommended I take it to a professional. I don't know what that would cost, but it definitely would have been outside of my budget. However, I've now spent at least $40 on Handcycle tools. I had to buy eventually a new type element. It cost me like $11, plus I bought lithium grease. Like a lot of other costs went into this machine. I'm now probably up over the $100 mark. So maybe it would have been worth it. And clearly that knowledge is valuable and worth the cost it would take to properly service this thing. I can't guarantee that it'll operate when it's done because I still haven't finished it yet. The best way to explain it is fixing a mechanical typewriter is kind of like working on a bicycle. Yes, it's mechanical, but they're identifiable parts, and it doesn't matter what bicycle you work on, it's still going to need a chain. And so working on those mechanical bicycles, you at least have a task list you can go through and kind of identify problems. But working on an IBM is kind of like working on a car. All of a sudden you add in all of these other elements, and unlike a typewriter, mechanical typewriter, where it doesn't need to be super precise to still operate, everything in this IBM is so down to the most precise movements that not even a little glob of grease can be in the wrong spot for it to operate properly. So it becomes really cumbersome and meticulous as you're working on these things, and there's 70,000 things that could go wrong in them. I was surprised by how mechanical it was without the motor. The fact that you can hand cycle through this and still do all of the jobs, you can even type with it being hand cycled, that is a little bit encouraging and gave me a little bit of hope midway through this process. I was so freaked out, but eventually by removing the motor and still being able to hand cycle it, I got a little bit better about working on it because I just thought about it as a mechanical piece instead of electrical, because electricity scares me. But it's not something that I necessarily want to tackle again. At this point, I've got it from a really heavy paperweight to something that mechanically looks interesting and can sometimes operate. So the next stage of this would be the adjustments. And man, the adjustments took even longer than trying to unfreeze it. If you are interested in IBM Selectric repair or have questions about your IBM Selectric, don't ask me, but check out those videos in the description below. I've got a ton from Phoenix Typewriter. He was super helpful to me while I was working on this machine. I spammed his tip jar. I also asked a lot of questions of Lucas, who runs Typewriter Chicago. If you need IBM repair, he does offer that in his shop in Chicago as well, and he answered a lot of my questions. I've also linked below the Facebook group, so if you have any questions, you can always ask there and kind of get a lot of resources in one place. If you want to see how I got this IBM, I'll link below my last video, which was a thrifting trip where I found this IBM. And if you want to see if I'm able to finish it, you'll just have to wait till the next one because it's still not done. If you're interested in more typewriter content, there are some other videos on this YouTube channel, as well as on my Instagram at just.my.typewriter. And thank you all so much for watching, and remind you, you're just my typewriter.